Hey, welcome to another episode of Grief to Growth. This is a podcast that looks at the intricacies of the human experience, from the sorrows of depths of sorrows, I should say, to the peaks of joy and everything that lies in between. And so, if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Brian Smith. I'm your host, and I'm here to offer you insights and companionship on this journey, this thing that we call life. Today, we've got the great pleasure of welcoming Pam Grout. She's not just an accomplished writer, she's a beacon of creativity, and she's an explorer of life's unseen laws, which I'm really interested in talking to her about. She's the number one New York Times bestselling author of 20 books, including the transformative E Squared and the Course of Miracles experiment. Her work transcends the written word, though. She invites readers to experiment with the energy that actually creates our reality. Her voice has graced the pages of top publications, sharing insights and adventures that span from the scientific to the spiritual. She's the visionary behind the TV series Going Rogue and runs two widely followed blogs where her wit and her wisdom shine through. And in addition to her literary genius, her heart is dedicated to the 222 Foundation, which is a tribute to her daughter, Tasmin, who continues to inspire and guide her from beyond the physical realm. For those of you like me to understand that love and connection transcends all boundaries, I think Pam's journey is going to resonate deeply with you. So if you want to find out more about Pam, you can go to her website, pamgrout.com. But with that, I'm going to welcome Pam to Grief to Growth.
Well, I thank you, Brian. That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We were talking before we got started. We have something in common. In fact, we have a daughter. I don't ever like to use the word died because I don't believe our kids die, but we have daughters in spirit. So I'd like to start by asking you about your daughter and give you a chance to tell us about Tasmin and introduce us to her.
Well, it's really interesting. I have never been married. And when I was about 36, a friend of mine was going to see a psychic. And, I'm always up for an adventure. And I thought, oh, I'll go along. And we're sitting there, and the psychic she'd come in from California. I was living in Connecticut at the time. And she went around the room, and told everybody what their next purpose in life. And here I am, this, traveler and freelancer and, not married. And she came to me and she says, I don't know if you're going to like this, but your next role in life is parenthood. So we walked out of that session and I said to my friend, that lady is crazy, that was one I didn't necessarily believe. But sure enough, within a month or two, I was indeed pregnant. Greatest gift of my life. And sure enough, I had Tasmin. She was born on October 8th, 1993. And she's just been, like I said, the greatest gift of my life and continues to be the greatest gift of my life. I feel still very close to her. But anyway, so I raised her. In the beginning, I was kind of looking to live in a community, that old thing, it takes a village to raise a child. So I was going around to various communities, like intentional communities. I went to one in Missouri, I went to one in Colorado. So anyway, and then eventually, my first book was published with a big publisher, and I got wrapped up in doing all that. And so I eventually just bought a house and raised her in a conventional way. I moved to a town that was a university town that was a little bit smaller. I've lived a lot of places, but I had been living in Kansas City and I wanted to live in a smaller place. And I had grown up in Kansas. So I raised her in Lawrence, Kansas, and she always thanked me for that. She loved it. It's the kind of town where there's plenty going on because of the university, but it's not a big city feel, so you can still walk around and enjoy things, but yet there's plenty to do. So It's a good place to raise her. She went on, graduated from Grinnell College, studied Spanish and anthropology, and had gone to Spain and had lived there for a while after she graduated, had come back to Lawrence and was going to head to China. But she ended up staying in Lawrence with a job. She got a job with Big Brothers Big Sister. She was Spanish speaking, coordinator or whatever for the program. So luckily she was here that last year of her life, which was, again, such a great gift that I was able to, be here, or she was here to be with me, and we'd call each other on the phone. Hey, you want to go fika, which is a term. We had been to Sweden together. We traveled a lot together because I did a lot of travel writing. And so fika is a term that you go and have a coffee and a pastry. So we would get together very often. She's already grown, has her own apartment and all that.
Mhm.
But so we've always just been super close. Again, as a travel writer, I took her all over the world. She'd been to 40 countries, in her short 25 years of life, which is pretty amazing for someone that age. And so she was always going with it. And she was just this beautifully kind, loving person. It's like she had some agenda, way beyond anything I could understand. I mean, I think she came to heal me in a lot of ways, but I also think she came to spread love, because she never did the things that a lot of kids do. Like a lot of her friends are into following the celebrities and you know doing those kind of things that teenage girls do. She just never had any interest in that. She was like, one of the stories I told, this is long before she passed, but when she was younger, we had done three things. We'd gone to a homeless shelter to serve one, in the effort, and then there was a parade we went to see. And then I think I took her to see Annie or some play at the Lead Center. So these three things we had done over this weekend. And the thing she said, the next Monday, like, oh, when can we go serve at the homeless shelter? That she just loved, she was just pure love. And she never, I mean, I always wanted to like help her with schoolwork or whatever, but she just did it all. She was just very self-motivated, self-driven, and didn't need a lot of my help. Although, again, we were just, super, super close.
Mhm.
And the year she passed, it was interesting. My father passed that year. My mother passed 9 days before Taz passed. And then we had just come back from my mother's funeral. And parents dying is a whole different ballgame than, I mean, they were in their 80s. It wasn't, and again, I've always believed that we're so much more than these bodies and that we're still connected. So those weren't like such earth-shattering things. But then, we literally had come back from my mom's funeral. Taz had gone with some of her friends to see, one of them had just moved into an apartment, and they all had gone up there that night. And because my mom had just passed, and this had just happened, I hugged Taz so big. I mean, I always hugged her when she left, but it was just like, oh, I love you so much, because you just never know, you know, because we just, finished up with the funeral. And then the next morning, we're texting each other. We're going to go see a movie, see a movie. And I noticed she hadn't returned a text after a while. And I had said, hey, let's go have breakfast before we go to the movie, just whatever. And next thing I know, there's a cop at my door. And she had an aneurysm, and they had her at the local hospital, Lawrence Memorial Hospital, and they were life flighting her to Kansas City. Well, I never spoke to her again, but that's how sudden it was. And again, 25, perfectly healthy, just the last thing I would have expected. And um, so anyway, yeah, it began a whole new journey for me, very different than the one I thought I was on,
Mhm.
how that does happen. So anyway, that's kind of Taz in a nutshell. I love, as I'm sure you do too, I love to talk about my daughter. And that's one of the things I think people think, oh, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to go there. But it's like my greatest joy to talk about Taz, as I'm sure you feel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing her with us. And I want to say I'm sorry for your loss. That that sudden loss of somebody that's so vibrant and such a important part of your life, I can only imagine the hole that must have left for you.
Yes. As I mentioned before, I was in the middle. I had a deadline on a book. It was my 20th book. And I was halfway through it. And I considered just, oh, I can't finish it. So my publisher even offered me that alternative, if you want to push the deadline back. And I did push it back a couple months, but I don't know, something about keeping on with my life in some way, to continue doing that, sort of kept me going, I guess.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's been very, very different transition, and how you look at your spirituality, and how you look at who a person is really, and who I am really, bigger than just this physical body. As Taz is much more than her physical body. And some of the stories that have happened, the way we've stayed in touch, even after that, I've been pretty remarkable. And I know being in the group here, and that's, definitely a part of that group. And it's very meaningful to be able to share that. So
Hmm.
yes, I've definitely on a path that I didn't knowingly choose in any way. So
Right.
um,
So you were living a big life of adventure and travel and everything before. I know for some of us, when something tragic like this happened, it kind of wakes us up and kind of forces us to start living, I guess. What changed for you when Taz passed? Because you mentioned that there was a transformation. What was that transformation like for you?
well, I was always interested in spirituality. I mean, that's what my books were about. That, this bigger thing that we are, this bigger part of ourselves. So I've always been interested in that. And interestingly enough, because of my books, I had several parents send me their books about losing a child. I mean, so I've been reading these books. I happen to be friends with Anita Morjani. So I already believed in so many of these concepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like so many things in spirituality, believing them, having a theoretical belief is different than having the true experience. So I would guess that has changed. I would say I've slowed down. Like I said, I did finish that book. I have yet to write another one, although the 10-year anniversary of E Squared just came out, but that was already written basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say I slowed down a bit. And I've really have a big focus on really learning who I am, who is I don't feel that I'm this body, this person, but I am spirit connected to everything. So I think it's really forced me to, smoke what I sell, so to speak, smoking what you sell. And so yes, I would say that. I also have started a foundation, as you mentioned in the introduction, for
Mm-hmm.
my daughter. We had a funny little game we played. It was when she was in junior high. Here I was telling you how she, didn't get into it, but she did start this funny little Facebook group called The Amazing Awesomeness of 222, as a junior high kid might. And all of her friends, like if they'd say, "Oh, what time is it?" And even if it was 5:42, she'd say 2:22, or how much does this cost? It didn't matter. It was $2.20. I mean, that was just her thing. So her friends would call her at 2:22. And so the year she kind of did that, we had gone on two trips. We'd gone to London and we got room 222. We had gone to Alaska, same thing. We happened to get 222. So throughout, I mean, she grew out of the little funny Facebook thing, but we continued to always send each other pictures of 222. Like, say, if I'd be in somewhere and I'd see the 222 or whatever. So, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd even written about it in E Squared, kind of her little 222 thing. And so it was just we'd already. And so soon after she passed, I got the message very strongly to start this 222 Foundation. And she would work with me. And so every year on 222, February 22nd, we give an award or grant to a person or a organization that is working to change the consciousness of the world.
Hmm.
And our belief is that is the thing we most need to do is change the consciousness, because as long as we believe some of the things we believe, we're going to continue acting in the way that we act. So we really need to change our consciousness. She was also a very creative, artistic person. So we really focus on projects that use creativity to make a difference in the world. So we've done all kinds of things. Interestingly enough, right after she passed, and again, I'm in kind of this fog, but I had already been scheduled to go to India for this Tribes for Good. They had invited me over there. And I'm thinking, how am I going to get on a plane and fly all the way to India? My daughter, I mean, it was a month later, but still, it's like, you're just shattered. You can't hardly get out of bed. I mean, so anyway, but I talked my friend, even though it was over Thanksgiving weekend, I talked my friend into leaving her family and going to India with me. And that's what enabled me to do it. And she participated in the Tribes for Good. But then we ended up going to the Taj Mahal, which is, we got to do the tourist thing while we're over there, right? So we go to the Taj Mahal. Our guide there happened to speak Spanish as well as Hindi and English, which that's interesting. But then he mentioned that the Taj Mahal, which is this amazing monument to love, I mean, that's what it is, but that it had taken 20,000 workers, 22 years to build it. So there's the 222. And then we find out, it was the favorite wife of this one mogul, this mogul from wherever. But he built this monument to, and his wife's name was Mumtaz. I mean, how wild is that? So anyway, so we left there, and I'd already had this idea that I was going to do a 222 foundation of, but it wasn't formulated. But we go out to this place called Shiro's Hangout. And it was a place where women who had acid thrown on them. In India, there's still a little bit of a culture like, oh, you didn't give me the son I wanted. They throw acid and it disfigures their face. I mean, it's very sad, but these women were out there because usually they go into hiding when that thing happens. And luckily it's rare, but when it does happen, they usually go into hiding and never seen again. But these women were going out there bravely with a little coffee shop, making, coffees and teas and, treats for people, totally free. People would leave donations if they felt like it. But they were getting ready to move. They needed to move to another space. So that was the first project of the 222 Foundation. And I felt like Taz led me there. We've just been to this, Mumtaz's Memorial to Love with these 20,000 workers, 22 years. It's like, wow, these signs, when you really start paying attention, as that they're so clear. And I feel like, in a way, signs and guidance is always available for us, always. But it takes, maybe paying attention in a new way. And that's maybe what happens, when someone leaves the physical, perhaps. But so yes, I started noticing these kind of things a lot more. I mean, that was my book E Squared was even kind of about science. So I, like I said, I was already into that, but it, again, taking it to a whole new level, seeing the signs I most love from my daughter. I mean, that's like my favorite sign. And luckily I've had a lot of readers and people over there. I'll tell you about another sign that we have, but people send me 222s to this day. It's been 5 years now since she passed, and they send me hedgehogs, which is another little thing that she and I had. So the stories around the hedgehogs are just, kind of really crazy, almost hard to believe, really. But anyway, I can tell you that too if you want to hear it.
Yeah. Tell me one of the stories about the hedgehog. Sure.
Well, so we had a little game that we played. Again, I'm kind of an unconventional person. I was always, a writer. I didn't have a regular job. She was raised in kind of an unconventional home. And this is that unconventional. We had this little game, and whoever would say hedgehog first when a new month came in was going to have a lucky month. That was just a silly little game we played. So, when she goes off to university, it's like, hey, she's up till midnight studying. So she always won, 12:01, man, of the month. Hedgehog. And then she went off to Spain. Of course, she's 8 hours ahead, same thing. Hedgehog. So, it was just a silly game we played. But about 5 or 6 months after she passed, a hedgehog came to my awareness on the first of the month in a kind of a weird way. And I sort of suspect that maybe every month before that was also happening, but it took me that long to notice. But since that time, and this has, been, 4.5 years, because like I said, it was about maybe 6 months before I noticed the first one, she always manages to send me a hedgehog in some strange way on the first of the month. For example, I was doing a podcast like this, and this woman I was talking, she goes, this is really weird, but there's this weird animal in my backyard. So watch out, Brian. You may not want to go. Well, I guess it's not the first of the month. But anyway, so she goes out. There was a May 1st one year, and there was a hedgehog back there.
Oh, wow.
One year, this is so wild. It's almost like if it didn't happen to me, I would hardly believe it, right? But I was having hip surgery, and I'm thinking, oh, man, I'm going to be on. It was on February 1st. It's like, I'm going to be under anesthesia. How in the world is she going to get assigned to me? But I come home. It was just a, in and out sort of thing. And this just gives me goosebumps. I come home from the surgery. There was a box of chocolate shaped like hedgehogs with a hedgehog toy. It was sent to me by a reader from Canada who had no idea I was doing surgery, who had no idea. I mean, he didn't know it was going to land on February 1st, or maybe, I don't know. I mean, again, my readers kind of know that I have this thing with hedgehogs, but I don't know. It's like I feel like Taz has all these emissaries out there. You know, like we've
Hmm.
got this big community, Taz and me and all these people.
Hmm.
And, you know, they're always supporting. I mean, I've gotten so much love and kindness and support from so many people. I mean, it's almost overwhelming. Like, wow, I don't know that I deserve all this. You know how sometimes we don't think we deserve all the good that comes our way. But anyway, yeah.
So this the psychic tells you that you're going to be a mother, which I'm sure
Yeah.
you were like, I could only imagine you must have thought she was insane.
Yeah, right.
Um, what are your thoughts now? Do you think that you and Taz planned this? You know, do you believe in destiny, soul planning, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I really try to live in the moment, you know, so I
Hmm.
try not to think too much about the past or the future. I mean, that's one of my practices is to really live in the moment where everything's really happening in my, you know, in my beliefs.
Sure.
But I do feel that she came to me for a very special reason. Again, I was all over the place. I'd travel all over the world doing all this stuff. And she really got me to settle down, write the books that I wrote that have, you know, really, according to people's, made a lot of difference in a lot of people's lives. So I feel like she came to me to get me to do, you know, because I started writing longer projects. I was always doing like travel articles and writing for magazines and things like that. But
Hmm.
it's like, hey, you're a mom, you want to stay here with your kid. They're in school, you know. So I took up book writing and then so that and also just to learn to love and open my heart in a whole different way as
Hmm.
becoming a parent does. So yes, I feel that, you know, I think she was always the wisest person in the room. So, you know, she may have, you know, been kind enough to say, I think I'm going to go to that crazy girl on there and you know, be her kid for 25 years and see what we can create together. So
Yeah, she sounds like an old soul, which a lot of
yeah.
the kids I talk to parents all the time whose children pass early, and there seems to be this almost old soul quality to them, this zest for life. You know, she sounds, I mean, all of her kids are phenomenal, but she sounds a lot like, you know, people that I talk to that had kids like this, that I feel like come into the world for a very specific reason for maybe a shorter period of time than the rest of us do.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I can see that. I mean, it's interesting because she loved kids. She was really great with kids and she wanted to have kids. So, you
Hmm.
know, you know, there's so many different dimensions going on, I think, in our lives. So,
Right.
you know, on one dimension, she's here in the physical plane, so she's going to do, you know, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
But obviously that never happened. And, you know, that's, you know, like I said, there I have so many reasons I could feel sorry for myself. I'll never have grandkids, you know, the whole stories that we tell ourselves.
Right.
But on the other hand, I got 25 years of being a parent. And for a person that's never been married, now I've got a partner I've been with for 22 years. And, you know, Taz, he came into our life when Taz was 22, but I mean, when Taz was 9.
Hmm.
So, you know, you know, she helped me settle down in that regard too, because I was, you know, always dating different guys and whatever. So, you know, so
Hmm.
yes, I feel like she helped me know what I did for her. I'm not sure. But, you know, I tried to be the very best parent I could, you know, and I helped her with a lot of creative things or, you know, encouraged her or whatever in that
Yeah,
regard. And I mean, you got to, her room, which still looks, I don't know, have you ever been to Meow Wolf or do you know what that is? It's an artist collective down in Santa Fe
I'm
and
not
they
familiar.
decorate these houses up crazy. Her bedroom, I mean, it's still like this, looks like a Meow Wolf installation. I mean, it's, you know, painted and all kinds of things. And not every parent will let their kid do that, you know. So I
Right,
kind of
right.
allowed her some creativity. And it occurs to me, Brent, I'm just blabbing. You mentioned, you said, oh, just, you know, go on and on. It's like I'm taking you very seriously. I'm sorry if I'm talking too much too
No,
fast.
no, you're great. This is exactly what I want. When people to get to know you, when people to get to know Taz. You know, I think that again, the children like her that come into the world, I think they come in for to reach a lot of people. And my wife used to say to my daughter Shayna, kind of jokingly, "You're going to be famous one day," you know. And Shayna, you know, people know her name, not like you, but all over the world now. I mean, people.
Uh-huh.
She's been on stage with Suzanne Giesman's giving presentations, and Shayna's picture's been up there. And so yeah, I think our kids, you know, they to me, we're still a partnership. We're still a team, and I sense that with you and Taz as well. That your relationship continues, and that she's still inspiring you.
Yes, that's so true. I couldn't have said it better. Oh, yes.
So such, I guess before Taz, you were writing like travel articles and blogs and stuff like that. And then did you is that when you morphed into more like the E Squared book and the Course in Miracles books? Was that after Taz came into your life?
Well, yes, but yeah, I started writing books.
Mm-hmm.
Before I was writing articles, and blogs didn't exist back when I mean, I've been a freelance writer for a long time. So I was, pitching to magazines, writing
Right,
for
right.
magazines, used to write for a newspaper, the Kansas City Star, as I
Mm-hmm.
like to say, was where Walt Disney and Ernest Hemingway got their start. So, so anyway, I wrote for the Kansas City Star. And then, but I'd been on my own for a long time as a freelancer because, again, I love traveling and love
Mm-hmm.
travel writing. So I was just, I did 3 books for National Geographic. And no, Taz was already born at that time. But again, staying home long enough to write books, it takes, a period, as you've written a book, it takes a period of time to write a book. You don't just dash it out. Well, even an article takes a little bit of time, but, usually a month or 2 weeks or, depending on that. So
Right.
it's like, okay, I need to be here. I'm going to be here when she's in school. In fact, it's kind of a story about E Squared. I had written that book under a different title. It was called God Doesn't Have Bad Hair Days, but basically it was the same book that ended up becoming, 40 languages and this big giant #1 New York Times bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came out as the new book, because I got the rights back and, changed it to E Squared, Taz had just gone off to college. And sometimes I think maybe that book, had the trajectory it did, after Taz was off to college. Because, before, if I was traveling off to the Philippines and Japan, all these places to talk about the book, I would have been there for Taz in school. So anyway, maybe the timing was right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I brought it back out. And, I got that hit, that intuition to bring it back out. And then it
Right.
took off and whatever. So, yeah.
So tell me about E Squared.
Well, it's the one that, started, this whatever, having all the blog posts and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a book. It has 9 do-it-yourself experiments to prove that your thoughts create your reality. And it's basically this idea that we're connected to a bigger force than just us. We are connected to this bigger force. Many call it God. In fact, that's what I called it. And God doesn't have bad hair days.
Mm-hmm.
But that this force wants to interact with us, wants to guide us, wants to bless us. I mean, that is what this force wants to do. And I feel like now Taz is in with that. It's like this other dimension that we're not always so aware of when we're in the material body. But so the book has 9 do-it-yourself experiments. I literally say to people, don't take my word for it. We spend all our lives taking the word of the preacher, or taking the word of the whoever it might be, the guru, the politician. No, try this for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I set up these things like scientific experiments. They're like little lab report sheets. I mean, I really wrote them up just like a lab report sheet. I said, give it, 48 hours for most of the experiments and see what happens. And I think the reason the book just took off, people loved that, doing it yourself. And they had all these remarkable results and they started blogging about it. People put up videos on YouTube. I mean, and then everybody's talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it took off at that point. So anyway, that's kind of the basis for it. But that's why I would get a lot of those books from, parents that had lost children, because there is more. And I've always known there's more. I didn't want this more for myself. I mean, the more, but not this more, the way that I've had to learn with Taz and being connected in a different way. So
Right. So I'm sure you've probably gotten the question. Someone says, "Well, if I create my own reality, I would have never created this." Time for a real quick break. Make sure you like and subscribe. Liking the video will show it to more people on YouTube, and subscribing will make sure you get access to all my great content in the future. And now back to the video.
yes, yes, yes. That was a big, like, whoa. Well, and one of the things I say is, like there's pointillist paintings, and when you get really close and you're right up to a pointillist painting, all you see are dots, right?
Mm-hmm.
So of course, no, I would not choose that. When you step back with the point and you see a bigger picture, you see more of what way it's supposed to be. So I'm not saying that I chose it. I won't go that far, but I can see how I can turn it into a thing that could be for my good, and that it could be for my benefit on some weird way. I think being a parent was definitely for my benefit. 25 years, I feel such great gratitude that I got to spend 25 years with this incredible person. I mean, how lucky am I? Again, it did not turn out the way I guess I thought it would, but life doesn't, right? I mean, life is ever changing, ever evolving, and we're interacting with it at all times, and we always have some say in it. And that might be, I may have, perhaps widened my understanding of that as well since Taz has passed. Oh, yeah.
So when it comes to creating a reality, are we co-creators? Would you say we're co-creators, or we absolutely create our reality? What level of control do we have over that?
Well, I feel like we're co-creators for sure with
Okay.
this divine force. I think what happens is we learn a lot of paradigms about the way the world works, and then we're limited by those beliefs that we have. We have a story. Like, it's a very strong story that Taz is no longer here. I mean, that's what 95%, I don't know what, would believe. But the story that works better for me is that she is here, and that I can contact her, and that I do have these miraculous gifts from her. So we have a lot of control over the story, but we learn stories, coming in, our parents teach us stories, our culture teaches us stories. And a lot of them aren't true, but once you believe a particular story, that is how it will play out for you, because you believe that story so strongly. So if anything, I really stand for opening your mind. And that's what these experiments kind of were. Open your mind and just see if there could be a bigger reality. Is it possible? That's what, this group that, is there a bigger reality? Is there a possibility of still staying in touch with our children? That's a good exploration experiment to do. And I'm grateful, that some of us are doing that.
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing is, when it comes to stories, I mean, two stories can be true at the same time. And the way I look at it is we can choose our story. And some people might call that creating a reality. That's I think a matter of semantics. So, for example, you could choose to tell ourselves a story that our daughters are no longer with us because they're physically not. I've heard people say, I'll never see them again, using the word never, meaning really the end of this physical life. Or we can tell ourselves a story that they are still with us and that I will see them again inevitably, because this life is not forever. And both things are true, and from a certain perspective. So in that sense, I would agree that we do get a chance to kind of create our reality.
Right. One of the things I wrote in one of my books is that just like you wouldn't go into a restaurant, look at the menu and pick I don't like this, and order that. Or you wouldn't walk into a department store and pick the ugliest dress or ugliest shirt, I guess, and take it to the counter. We have a choice over what we choose. So thoughts and the stories, we have some choice over that. And for me, I prefer the story that makes me happier, that makes me have more joy. I mean, to choose joy in the face of grief is a defiant, radical act. It truly is. And because you could get all the sympathy you want. I mean, we have earned it. We could get a lot of people going, oh, you poor thing. I mean, that is definitely, but I choose a different story, and it serves me. If I'm wrong, it still serves me. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think from your I don't think you can be wrong, because again, I think both stories are true depending on how you decide to look at it. I'm curious about this idea, though, of creating a reality in terms of I was reading on your blog someone who needed a certain amount of money, and that amount of money, came into their lives just when they needed it. So how's that manifested for you, or what kind of stories can you tell us that that's happened for other people?
Oh, well, that's one of the things about E-Square that's been kind of rewarding for me. When I told that story about the 222 and Taz, I gave my email address. This is before I knew that I was going to hear from hundreds of thousands of people, maybe millions. But um, if sometimes just knowing that synchronicities happen, because I told about how we had the hotel rooms to do and too.
Mm-hmm.
And so send me your story. So people had my email. So I have heard so many stories from people. I mean, hundreds of thousands of stories about people that had some kind of gift, because you're not necessarily specifying from the universe, give me this. Although sometimes we do that, but it's more like, I trust that it's a benevolent universe, that again, this force wants my good and wants to guide me, wants to bless me. So if we believe that, then we're more open to seeing those signs, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if I quite answered your question. But,
Well, yeah, the question was, I guess, from the perspective of, I guess, the skeptic that says, I'm not actually creating my own.
right.
When we talked about, from one paradigm, we can tell ourselves different stories. I guess I was going to the next level: is, am I actually creating my reality? Can I bring things into my life?
Right. Well, I've heard a lot of stories like that. I mean, everything from cars to $100,000. I mean, to all kinds of things. And the one I think you're probably referring to was the one about the woman who just happened to open the book and there was $20 bills. Is that the
Yeah,
story?
that's the one. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's so far out of most people's belief system, right? I mean, and that was kind of the point of me putting that on there. It's like, well, if this sounds impossible, and I can see that. I mean, like I said, I can see both sides of every coin. Then that probably isn't going to happen to me, right? Because I'm not, that can't happen. But if you are open enough, maybe it can happen. I mean, the truth of it is, this thing about dark matter, um, you know, we only see a minute part of the electronic frequency, the electromagnetic frequency. I mean, that's all our little eyes are able to see.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much out there that we can't process it because, it's just so much. So we all choose, okay, this is the part I'm going to focus in on. And then we kind of create within that little band of focus. So my position is that I want to open that focus wider,
Mm-hmm.
to open up to what some people might call miracles, but which to me is the way the world works. But so you can call it a miracle, you can call it whatever you want. To me, that is the reality of the way the world works. And that's what I guess I tried to prove to people in that. And one of the things, it's funny because I heard so many stories about material things that people manifested. I am just not into material things myself. I love the stories of the connection that people make. And I've gotten a lot of those stories
Mm-hmm.
too. People heard from a long lost relative that forgave somebody they'd been on the outs with. So many, many, many stories like that as well. And truly, that to me is much more miraculous than getting some, car. I'm kind of one of these live simple people. We've we don't need all the, the material stuff. I'm,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I'm more interested in the spiritual side, or the non-material side of life and myself. And
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting you say that, because the stories that get the big splashes are the ones like, I manifested
right.
$100,000, or I manifested $1,000 or something. But we all have stories of, I was thinking about someone that I hadn't heard from in 15 years, and then they called me, or the other synchronicities that happen in our lives. And I'm an engineer. It's my background, so I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to know how things work. And
Right.
I've been hearing about synchronicities. I'm hearing about manifestation, and then from a scientific point of view, and I like what you talked about, the electromagnetic spectrum, that we only see a small part of that. Because Carl Jung wrote all about synchronicities, and
Mm-hmm.
we all see them. We all know that these things happen. And the theory that I've seen proposed now is like, we look at cause and effect, and we know a very small amount, right? So we can predict certain things, but only certain things. Anything beyond that we call random. But the reason why we call it random is because we don't understand the forces that are creating it. So from our perspective, it's random. Like if you flip a coin, we would say, well, it's going to randomly land on heads or tails. But we know that's not true. If you knew exactly all the variables, you could predict just how that coin's going to land. So my rambling here is to say, I think there are forces outside of what we can understand. And maybe those forces are things like thought and intention. Maybe those things do actually interact with the physical world in ways that we don't currently understand.
Right, right. And one of the things people have enjoyed about my book is there are people, engineers and doctors, and people that are skeptical. And I encourage people to be skeptical. That's why I said, do not take my word for this.
Mm-hmm.
Just try this, what I say, and see what happens. And those are some of my favorite stories when I get those, because a lot of people, well, some people are so skeptical, they're never going to believe that. Like, oh, we go in and we say, hey, yeah, we're still in touch with our daughters. They're going to go, you guys are crazy. I mean, they would call us crazy. But I always consider that a compliment when people tell me I'm too woo-woo. I go, thank you. Because I mean, that's my life. That's how and I choose, that's a choice to believe that way. But I also mention a lot about, quantum mechanics. I do include quite a bit of that in E Squared. And I think, for those people that are more skeptical, I think that satisfies. I mean, some people aren't ever going to believe it, and that's fine. But there are, I think that does, I do have that piece of it as well.
Yeah, well, even that term "woo woo," it's interesting because doing the program that I do, I was interviewing someone the other day, and I asked her a question. She said, "Oh, here we go. We're gonna get woo woo." And then I was interviewing another guy, pretty recently, and I asked him a question. He goes, we're going into that," and I'm like, to me, it's not woo woo is not crazy. It's not just based on wishful thinking. I think it goes beyond what we call the rational, right? So when you talk about it's a scientific principle, dark matter, dark energy. We know that they exist. We don't know what they are. We can't define them. We can't detect them. I mean, we talk about we can only see so much of the electromagnetic spectrum, but even our instruments can't detect dark matter and dark energy. So what are they? And how do they interact with the physical world? Those are questions that we can't answer.
Right. Well, there's so much more than we see that we know.
Mm-hmm.
And dark matter is one proof, because we know these things are happening this way, but we don't know why. But this is some explanation. And, some scientists say, oh, eventually we'll figure everything out. I kind of don't think we will, because I feel like it's always evolving. Again, we put our energy out into this, so there's just a lot of forces. And I feel like it's an evolving thing.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing stays the same. We are moving rivers of energy. Our bodies are, we're 99.9% space. So, you know what I mean? There's just, I'm not sure we can understand it. And personally, one of my greatest spiritual practices is, I don't know if you ever saw that old show, Hogan's Hero, but Colonel Schultz would say things like, I know nothing. It's all these American guys were in the camps, and
Oh
they
yeah.
were
Mm-hmm.
always, so anyway, so I feel like I don't want to know anything. I want to be open. I mean, I don't want to be sure about anything. I want to, realize there's more than I can know, more than my little pea brain can understand. These little blobs of, matter in our heads only can go so far, but there's a lot more than just that. So,
Yeah, it's for me, it's really interesting because I am again engineer by nature. I want to figure out how does it work, and I wouldn't go so far as to say that one day we'll know everything, because I don't think our brains can comprehend it, and I think it goes beyond what we as physical beings can understand. But just having that understanding, I think, is taking a big leap forward, as opposed to the materialist who says, well, it's only the material. Because again, what do we call material? Is dark matter and dark energy, is that material or not? It's
right.
not. It's not part of our physical everyday experience. So why wouldn't spirit be the same? So I view it like, I tell people there is no supernatural. There's only what we don't understand yet. Doesn't mean that we will understand it anytime soon, but there is something beyond our understanding.
Yes. And would you say with your daughter's passing, that has come more clear to you as well? And probably if I'd have been listening to your podcast all along, I'd know the answer to this. So sorry if I'm making you repeat something everybody
No,
your
no,
listeners all know.
absolutely. I what I've realized is I'm a very left brain person, right? So I'm like, again, I would push back against the woo woo when I was younger. I'd say the woo woo intuition, no. And what I'm realizing is there is a big role for intuition in our lives. There's a big role for, following that feeling that we have, those emotions that we have. Again, I kind of come up from more of a scientific perspective, if you want to call it that. I believe that we have a connection to our higher selves, to our team, to our loved ones who are on the other side. So there is, it's really real. It's something that's there. It's part of our human nature. I think that in our Western paradigm, we just gotten so caught up with is it has to be this way. It has to be Newtonian, for example. Everything's got to be cause and effect. And I think there's something beyond that. And that's an understanding I've definitely gotten since my daughter passed, and something that I'm really working on. So like when I read your story on your blog, I loved what you said. How does this make you feel? This person finding these, because again, we're trained to like, okay, well, she must have put the money in the book, and maybe she subconsciously knew where the money was, because we want to go to that, trying to figure it out. But I've had signs from my daughter that they go beyond any kind of reasonable explanation. Things that just should not have happened, and you can sit down and maybe try to calculate the odds and say, what are the odds that you were going to get the rooms that you got, or the hedgehog, the guy is going to send it and it's going to arrive on that day. We can play games with that, but that's kind of I think the fun of like books like yours that push us on our paradigms, that say maybe you don't have this quite all figured out, and just we relax in the fact that I don't have to figure it all out too. I think that's another thing we need to get to.
Right. The paradigm is that, the knowledge is the most important thing. Well, to me, wisdom and knowledge are completely different, and that connection is different than, education is important. I encourage my daughter, in that direction. And I,
Right.
have a master's degree and all that. But I feel like the real answers, the answers of the things I want to know, are not something I'm going to learn from a book or from another person. It's within me. It's with my connection to something that I don't understand. I just want to be open. I want to plug into that electricity, to use it. One analogy I've often used, like, are you plugged into that source that is wanting to, guide us? Most people aren't, because of their belief systems, their paradigms, those narrow paradigms that we're so sure are right. But,
right.
It could be different.
Well, I love what you just brought, wisdom and knowledge, because to me, it's like you can read books all day long about something, but until you know how to apply it, it's just knowledge. It's not wisdom. And I think a lot of the things that you and I are saying, we might have known on some level intellectually before our daughters passed, but when that happens, that's when it gets applied, right? That's when I'm a spiritual being. Okay, well, how much do you really believe that? Can you hold that perspective when your daughter's not in the physical anymore?
Right. That's the ultimate test. And sometimes people will say to me, I can't believe how well you've done. And I think, well, sometimes I do really, really well. I still have moments where I don't do well. I'm not, so spiritually attached that I don't feel grief, and that I don't feel sadness, and I don't feel, all the things. Those things never end. Our life has changed. My life has changed. But that doesn't mean I can't still be committed to gratitude, committed to seeing a bigger picture. So, yeah, it's a complex world we live in, for sure.
It is. And that's, again, it goes back to this, two things can be true at the same time, two very different things. I always try to let people know, okay, for me, it's been 8 years since my daughter passed. It's coming up on 9 years. And so first of all, I'm like, okay, it hasn't been like this for me for 9 years. I mean, 3 years, I was a total mess, and I still have moments, I've had moments very recently where it's like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe I'll look at a picture of Shayna and it's like, this doesn't seem real that she's not here anymore. So I want people to understand that when you and I are sitting here having these conversations, it doesn't mean like, oh, okay, well, now I have this perspective. It's all good. I'm all over it.
Oh, right. No, it's definitely not that case at all. And people, I hope people know that. I think I'm pretty honest in my blog post, although the people that know me on a day-to-day basis will see more of the grief maybe than my blog post. Maybe it's like I jump into the phone booth, and come out like, oh, on a blog post or whatever. But,
Sure.
both are true. And what you said is so the paradox. I mean, it is all true. In fact, I believe there's more than just two things can be true. There can be a lot of different things can be true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, even that, and I know I have to ask you the questions like, how does this manifestation work? Because again, that's that thing we have, right? So what percentage of it is my thoughts? What percentage of it is other people's thoughts? What percentage of it is God? People they would like, I want to plug in, I want to have the formula, but what it is, it's really, really complex. We've got a lot of things going on. We've got physical things, we've got spiritual things, we've got other people's thoughts, we've got our thoughts. We have, if you believe in life planning, we have we have life plans that overlap and intersect. And, I've seen a lot of parents get really kind of down on, if you talk about pre-birth or life planning, they'll say, well, I would have never planned this. Well, it's not just our plan, it's my plan and Shayna's plan. It's your plan and Taz's plan. And so, she got something out of the time she spent here. You got something out of the time she spent here. And those things do overlap, but they're not exactly the same.
Exactly. Yes, for sure.
So I know you also have a book about A Course in Miracles, and is that similar to the E-Squared book? Because I know you talk about experimentation with that as well.
Well, it's funny because my publisher, you have marketing so different than writing. And so
Yes,
they
yes.
wanted to put experiment in the title. So it is called the Course in Miracles Experiment,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not the experiment. That's just they wanted, to take
Mm-hmm.
that winning formula. But what it is, are you familiar with the Course in Miracles?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So, there's the 365 daily lessons. And
Mm-hmm.
so how this book came about, 2018 was the year when Kaz died, my mom died. At the beginning of that year, I tend to go through the Course in Miracles every year. So, I start lesson 1 on January 1st. And this particular year, I was blogging about about the course and
Mm-hmm.
the lessons. And so, pretty much every day I was blogging about it. And pretty soon people start, oh, you need to turn this into a book, and I'm a little slow, but after you hear about 50 of these messages, oh, okay, maybe I should turn this into a book.
Mm-hmm.
So what the book is basically is they call it Pam Grout speak. I tend to write in kind of a lighter, less serious, but it's serious, but it's, you know, I want it to be sustainable, so if it's a little more fun, it tends to be more sustainable. So I
Mm-hmm.
write in a lighter way. So people wanted me to write, the Course in Miracles, those daily lessons in the way I spoke. And I'd
Okay.
already written a bunch of them because I've been blogging about it. So, my publisher said, yeah, let's do that. So that's the book I was working on when Taz passed. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that might make the course a little bit more accessible for people who don't know. That was channeled, and I think it was the 1970s. The
Yeah, and it's interesting because it was two professors at Columbia University. I think they were in the medical psychology or something, but they were having a lot of fighting. The department wasn't getting along. And one day, one of them, it might have been Bill Thetford, the head of the department, said, there's got to be a better way, than all this fighting and things. And it was almost like on cue, this voice started coming through Helen. This is the better way. And that's kind of how most people get into the Course in Miracles. It's like, what I'm doing now isn't quite working for me. There's got to be something better. So
Mhm.
that was how I got into Course in Miracles. And even the book E Squared, he talks, some of the principles from the Course in Miracles. I've been a student of Course in Miracles for way before Taz was born, long, long
Mhm.
ago. So that's kind of my, little spiritual practice, I guess you could say. So anyway, that's what Course in Miracles experiment is. Even though it's not experiments, it's just, the lesson.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's a similar way of looking at the world, and A Course in Miracles. I've looked at it some. It's an intimidating book if anybody's
Oh
ever
my
picked it
gosh,
up.
yes.
It's so it was channeled by these people, and I think it was the 70s, and this Jesus speaking, it's kind of giving a new message, right? It's like you guys basically got it wrong with the Bible, so I'm going to come back and I'm going to give you more detail. And and I've interviewed some of the people that have been associated with it, and it's a great thing, but it can be hard to access. So I think maybe your book might be a more approachable way for people to get to the material.
Right. That's what a lot of people say. Well, one of the things I said in the introduction, I said, if you go to a typical spiritual gathering and somebody goes, "Oh, how many people have a copy of Course in Miracles?" 100% or whatever will raise their hand. How many people have read it? And there's maybe two hands. It's too big. It's like the big blue doorstop. So it's like
Right.
it's got such a great message, but it's not easy. And it kind of appeals to people that are kind of intellectual, I think. I mean, you might enjoy it just because it, there's a lot of explanation for a pretty simple message, but anyway, it's not for everyone. If it's your path, you recognize that, and I think I recognize that, and
Hmm.
embarked upon that path. So
Yeah, well, it shows you that truth is, I think, everywhere in a lot of different formats, and what's accessible for one is not accessible for another. And so I think truth comes in different ways, in different forms, and as I study all these different things, a lot of them are basically saying the same things, right? We're spiritual beings having a human experience. It's all about love. It's all about connection. Like you were saying, things come and things go. So this world is the Course of Miracles basically says it's a dream. This world's kind of illusory in a way, which is a very common teaching in a lot of even ancient Eastern teachings from
mhm,
10,000 years ago.
mhm. Yeah, so true. Yes, and a lot of people compare it to Buddhism or whatever. So yeah.
Hmm.
And I do like this idea that the woman that channeled it, the two of them did it together. And in the beginning part, it had a lot about how they could like eliminate some of their issues and grievances.
Hmm.
Then they took a lot of that out when they actually published it. It just talks more about how more of a universal message of
Right.
letting go and forgiving, but forgiving in the sense that what we were talking about earlier, do I really know this is the way it is? So forgiving is being willing to look at a bigger picture more than just, oh, he did me wrong and I'm going to forgive him. It's like looking at things in a bigger way. So
Hmm.
that's kind of more what forgiveness is. And that's what the Course in Miracles is all about, looking, beyond, the what do they call it? It would collapse the wave, in quantum physics, I would collapse the wave and then that's all we can see. So this is like, let's uncollapse the wave, so to speak, and let's look at a bigger picture.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you've written 20 books, and you said you kind of taken a break. Do you have any more books planned?
I've been working off and on a book called The Ego's Playbook. And it's kind of, again, a humorous thing where the ego, how did the ego get in our minds, tell us all the stories that the ego tells us. Oh, well, you shouldn't have done that. And you
Hmm.
should do this. And, just we get down on the ego's like always talking, the chatter in the brain. So it's kind of a funny thing where it's like, like a football coach has his game plan. So this is like the ego's game plan, but how I'm going to own humanity.
Oh
And
wow.
I kind of worked on it off and on here and there. And again, it's kind of from some of the ideas from Courts and Miracles.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm not in the process. I don't have a deadline or a publisher at this point. It's just
Right,
something I'm kind
right.
of playing around with. Yeah.
Yeah. So what keeps you busy these days?
Well, I went to Spain over the summer. The guy that did some of the artwork for the 10-year anniversary of E Squared was from Cadiz, Spain, and offered us his place, my partner and I. So, hey,
Oh
a
wow.
place on the beach? Wow, yeah, let's go. So spent
Yeah.
6 weeks over there. I'm really, as I mentioned earlier, like really into living in the moment and
Hmm.
really listening to the guidance and what is mine to do. And I'm not quite clear what it is. It might be just a day-to-day thing.
Sure.
I've definitely slowed down, since Taz has passed, not traveling at the speed I did. And so I don't know. I'm open for further instruction. I'll say that.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to live.
Hmm.
As you said, everything is temporary. It comes and it goes, and being open to that guidance on a daily basis. And again, it's one of those things. It's not that simple. It's like living in the moment, but also we kind of have to plan for the future, depending on where we are in
Hmm.
life too. I interviewed someone the other day that was a pretty young person that says I live in the moment, and I'm like, yeah, but we still have to kind of plan for retirement in the world that we live in. So there's always that tension.
Right. Well, the course says planning is a defense against God. And I guess how I would interpret that is, to be open to if plans don't go the way you think they would, because you can get a lot of disappointment, a lot of, regret and unhappiness if your plans don't go quite the way you want them to.
Right.
But I feel like for me, as I live more and more in the moment and being in touch with that bigger force, that everything I need to know, everything that needs to be planned, it's kind of becomes clear. The right person comes along or the right
Hmm.
financial planner, if you want to talk, in
Hmm.
material things, but that things have a way of working out. And sometimes when we plan and stress too much, we close down to what other possibilities. I talk a lot about possibility state versus problem state. And most people tend to live in problem state. Like,
Right.
okay, here's the problem. We're going to fix this. And I prefer to live more in possibility state. But so I do plans. But, there, of course, it does say that planning is a defense against God. I'm like, okay. But again, that's one that's a little, you can,
Yeah.
again,
Well,
both ways of looking at it, right?
that's an interesting quote. And again, it was channeled Jesus supposedly
Right,
speaking in it. And, Jesus talked about, don't worry about tomorrow and stuff like that. So
right.
as we were talking, I just had this thought pop in my head. Would Jesus have a 401k? Because,
Yeah, that could
Jesus,
be a book. That could be
yeah,
your next book, right?
yeah, he lived in a society where he said we need money to pay the taxes to go out and catch a fish, and there's going to be a coin in its mouth. Well, we can't really get by that way.
Right.
So
Well, can we not, or do we believe we can? I mean,
yeah,
have you heard of Peace Pilgrim?
I have. I can't remember exactly what it
Okay,
is.
well, when she was maybe
Yes,
70, or
yes,
she
yeah,
started walking and she didn't carry anything with her. She just trusted in the
yes,
goodness
yes,
because she trusted in God so much. She almost always had a bed. Somebody would offer it, somebody give her a meal, but she had nothing. She was totally going on faith. And even though that's not I mean, I think she passed, I don't know, a while ago, but still, that's kind of modern times.
hmm,
So I wonder, and I'm not there yet. I still, want to have a, but you know what I mean? I do wonder if I could totally surrender everything like she did.
yeah,
Would life take care of me? I mean, that's my theory.
yeah,
I don't know quite yet if I'm going to be able to prove it, and am I even working to prove it? But I do. That's my thesis, I suppose, that I needs to be tested.
interesting possibility to explore. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, Pam, it's been wonderful having you here today. So tell people again, remind them of the titles of. I know you've got 20 books, but tell them about a couple of your books and where people can reach you.
Well, if people go to my website, it's all on there. I don't sell my books on there, but they're all listed on there.
Hmm.
I don't feel like I'm a big person on trying to sell things. I have one of the things I've said that I want to be the Warren Buffett of happiness. I
Yeah,
said that before, Taz, but nonetheless, that's more what I'm interested in is, mental states and gratitude. I don't care about all that, marketing and selling stuff. I mean, you got to do some of that, but that's not my focus. So,
yeah, and I want to say this to you because you're here to make a difference in the world, and a lot of people that I interview are like that. And so when I ask them this question, they get embarrassed because they're like, I don't want to sell anything, and it's not selling; it's making your offering available to people. It's I think I know that you have something that people want and want to be aware of. So your website is pamgrout.com.
Right. And all the socials, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Not that I do a lot of social media, but
Yeah.
I do have a profile out there. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, great to speak with you today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
yeah, thanks so much, Brian. Your daughter is so beautiful. I feel like I'm speaking to both of you today. So
Yeah, thanks. All right. I'll see you soon.
okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.